Hello there, this is Jeremy Arney, Interim Leader of the Canadian Action Party, talking to you again today. This time I'm talking to you about Bill C-51. I'm sure a lot of you are probably well aware of what Bill C-51 is. It's an anti-terrorist bill which really is misnamed. It's another omnibus bill from our friend Mr. Harper. What can one say about it? It's typical. It's a typical Conservative or Reform Alliance bill. When I first read it, I sort of skimmed through it and thought, yeah, this is just a lot of bills rolled into one and nothing really here is that important. But then I sat down and I started reading again, and I started watching and hearing what other people were saying about it. And I've gone into it a great deal more detail, and this bill is absolutely terrifying. It's terrifying enough that it is an act of terrorism in itself. One of the paragraphs, if you like, or statements that Minister Blaney and the Justice Minister keep repeating is one that goes like this: for greater certainty, it does not include lawful advocacy, protest, dissent, or artistic expression. Well, I have some news for you. That is not in the bill about terrorism. That is in the bill about, right at the very beginning of it, which is the bill about communication between different forces such as the police, CSIS, and the RCMP. It's got nothing whatsoever to do with the criminal code, which is the one which is giving CSIS these incredible powers. It also says, including lawful advocacy. Well, what does that mean, for heaven's sake? I'll give you the case of Burnaby Mountain. A little while ago, Kinder Morgan decided that they wanted to conduct some work on the top of Burnaby Mountain to figure out where they were going to put their tunnel through it, with a pipeline going through the middle of the tunnel. Well, they have not got the go-ahead to even build this pipeline yet, and yet they wanted to do this work, this exploratory work. Naturally, people protested. They didn't like the concept of work being done on the mountain without the environmental approval, and I am in full support of that. What I'm not in support of is the fact that a BC court granted an injunction against the protesters on behalf of Kinder Morgan for them doing work which, it turns out to, amusingly enough, was even being done in the wrong spot, so that protesters couldn't be up there. Now, if this was lawful, what does it mean in terms of this statement I just read to you about lawful? How can a court grant an injunction on unlawful work and lawful protesters? Doesn't make sense. Whoever the judge is, perhaps their bank account should be examined very carefully. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but it's a logical conclusion that something is really wrong. Now, if this particular new law, Bill C-51, anti-terrorist section of it, was in effect, then Kinder Morgan could be charged with terrorism, simply because an activity that undermines the security of Canada means any activity, including any of the following activities, and there's about 12 of them, including if it undermines the sovereignty, security, or territorial integrity of Canada, or the lives or the security of the people of Canada. Well, think about that for a second. Kinder Morgan, without permission, were going to go ahead and blast away through a mountain, and regardless of who is being affected. That's an act of terrorism on the people who live in the way. You know, you get down to this thing about terrorism. What is an act of terror? Well, okay, we can go to that. Let's go to that right now. Here, I've got a definition of terror right here somewhere. Terrorist activity means an act or omission that is committed in or outside Canada, and that, if committed in Canada, is one of the following offences. In whole or in part, for political, religious, or ideological purpose, objective, or cause, and in whole or in part with the intention of intimidating the public or segment of the public with regard to its security, including its economic security, or compelling a person, a government, or a domestic, or an international organization to do or to refrain from doing any act, whether the public or the person, government or organization is inside or outside Canada. So that act that was being tried to be done by Kinder Morgan falls within that very definition, therefore was an act of terrorism on the part of people who live around and near Burnaby Mountain, because it affected everything in their lives. So it could have done, should it have been allowed to go forward unscathed. So the next thing that crops up here is, again, I need to get this definition right so that you fully understand what I'm trying to say here, is to do with the concept that under this bill, following on from Bill C-44, which introduced this concept, is concerning getting a warrant from judges. Interestingly enough, warrants can only be got from provincial judges, because the federal government doesn't have enough judges, and doesn't have enough judges with money to be able to hear the cases. So they have to go through a provincial judge. Now, provincial judges, especially the Supreme Court variety, are very jealous of their time. So in the event that something should happen that needs immediate attention on a Friday night or a Saturday morning or Sunday morning, they are not going to be available. So one goes down the list of judges in the criminal code to eventually get to the most likely to be available, which is a JP. Without regard of any other law, including that of a foreign state, remember that, including that of a foreign state, a judge, or JP, may, in a warrant issued under subsection 3, authorize the measures specified in it to be taken outside Canada. This means that a spy who works for CSIS can go to a JP and get a warrant which will affect the laws of any other country in the world. Now, that in itself is also an act of terror upon every other country in the world. And I ask this simple question. Let us say, for the sake of example, that Hamas's legislature, which was semi-democratically elected, by the way, decided that the Canadian laws should no longer be abided by them. Can you imagine the uproar that would come from the Reform Alliance Party and the rest of the Canadian Parliament, and for that matter for the Canadian people, that the Palestinian people would consider our laws to be invalid here in Canada? Well, people, we're telling them exactly the same thing. Their laws are immaterial to us. Should a JP decide that a spy has made a good case. There's things in here which say that the Attorney General has to give approval of this. Now, this means the Attorney General of Canada. Well, good luck in trying to get to meet with him, especially on a Friday or Saturday morning. Or good luck with the provincial Attorney General. They're just not available. So, as I say, it comes back down to JPs. All right, so the judicial aspect of it, which is the so-called judicial oversight, that's what it is a JP who can issue an e-warrant, to have all these things done. All right, now the next thing I want to get onto here is another paragraph that is absolutely amazing. You remember where this happened last? Very well. It happened under McCarthyism, where every American looked at every other American thinking to themselves, I wonder if this guy's a communist. And before that, where did it happen? It happened in Germany in the 30s. People were turned into informants. A person who fears on reasonable ground that another person will commit an offense under section 423.1 or a criminal organization offense may, with the Attorney General's consent, lay an information charge before the provincial court judge. That is an open invitation. It says down again here, a person who fears on reasonable ground that another person may commit a terrorist attack, or terrorist offense, may, with the Attorney General's consent, lay an information before a provincial court judge. Last Friday, 6th of March, Commissioner Paulson was in front of the House of Commons Public Safety and National Security Committee introducing a video which he claims came from Murahab, whatever the heck that gentleman's name is. I've got it written somewhere, I can never remember how to pronounce it, Bibo, whatever his name is. in his car before he did his deed on the 22nd of October. But Mr. Paulson, Commissioner Paulson, was basically saying at the end of the time that he spent there is, we encourage everybody to watch out for things that they think might be suspicious. In other words, and I'll talk to Paul right here because he's behind the camera. Paul, if I thought that perhaps you were treating your beautiful woman with anything less than extreme courtesy, I could turn you in as being attacking a female person. And according to what everybody's telling me, that's an act of terror. Your wife could consider that this is an act of terror. It's got to the point now where we are being encouraged to turn ourselves into a climate of fear, a climate of exposing other people simply because we don't like them. How many people do we all know that we'd love to get into trouble one way or another? Well, for those who have those inclinations, I have a few, but I'm going to keep those quiet. For people who have those inclinations, here is the perfect opportunity to get your own back. Just say that in your mind they are acting suspiciously and you think that they might be involved in terrorism. What happens is they get picked up, they get taken away into detention, and they have a smear against them for the rest of their lives. Half of Canada could end up in detention with smears against them simply because the neighbor decided that somehow down the road they had been slighted and they wanted to get their own back. I came to Canada in 1967. I didn't come here to live in a country, well no, let me rephrase that. I came here to live in a country that was free, with an attitude of everything can be done. If a boiler blew in the middle of the night, were 5 or 6 people who were more than willing to get out of bed at that time of night to come and help you out. If you broke down beside the road, people were stopping all over the place to help you out. That attitude doesn't exist anymore. And it doesn't exist anymore largely because we've been turned into a nation of people who are told to mind your own damn business. I don't like that. That's not what I want for my grandchildren and my 2 now great-grandchildren. I want them to be in a land that's free. And Mr. Zimmer, you said it yourself on the 6th of May in your committee hearing. You want your children and your grandchildren to be in a land that's free. If you vote for this bill, you're voting against that happening, because here, I've just shown you in a couple of very short examples, it's not going to happen. This bill is the most destructive, most anti-sovereign, most anti-national, most anti-Canadian people, and 2 other things that I haven't got onto, but I'm going to bring them up right now. Anti-union and anti-First Nations, Métis, Inuit. Everything in it points to the First Nations people and the Union people being busted by this government because they stand in the way of economic growth amongst their corporate friends. Okay, you've heard everybody talk about corporate this, corporate that, corporate everything else again. But who's standing in the way of the Northern Gateway pipeline? First Nations, because they want to protect their land, their property, and their way of life. Who's standing in the way of Kinder Morgan pipeline? First Nations again, with a lot more ordinary people now getting behind them and saying no. Mostly because it's planned to go and run right through Vancouver and Burnaby, and the people there say, no, not in my backyard. But all these people will be wide open for terrorism charges because they will be affecting the bottom lines of corporations. This is what it's all about. There's another organization, quite well known in Canada, that is going to be charged with terrorism under this act, and that is the BC government. Because they want to do 2 things. They want to destroy a whole bunch of the Peace River country by putting up a Site C dam for hydro we don't need. And they want to frack the living bejeepers out of the northeast part of the province, turning the entire water table up there toxic. Now, is that friendly or is that terroristic? What about the people who live up there? Do they not have a certain amount of terror coming as to what's coming their way? They already live in the middle of an oil boom area where the trucks running day and night, where the wells are running day and night. People are sick up there simply because they can't sleep. Trucks never stop. Beavers up in that part of the world, believe it or not, build a dam, build a little pond, and the pond gets emptied by bypassing dump water trucks who want the water. And they just help themselves. Are they paying for it? No. I have asked Coleman, who used to be in charge of this, time and time again, Where are you going to get the water from? Because eventually you're going to run out of lakes. You're going to run out of rivers. They're all going to run dry. Where do you get it from? That's another act of terror. This opens up so many different things, and it's not just the people who are being attacked. It is the corporations if we allow that to happen. Okay, so now what I want you to do, yes, I'm asking you to do something. I want you, everybody here watching, to read what Paul is going to put down on the screen. It is the name of the committee that is looking at this bill. It's the name of the clerk of the committee, and it's the name of the chairman of the committee. And what I want you to do, if you would please, because this is about all we've got left we can do now, is to send in a submission to the clerk of the committee. If you can do it in both languages, great. If you can't, just send it in the one and allow them time to translate it themselves. But it's better if you can do it in two. Tell them what you think and give them reasonable grounds for what it is that you're claiming you don't like. The bill is not hard to read. And all that I have read there is in that bill. If you send that to the committee and they get hundreds, thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of submissions, they must, by committee rule, read them. They have no choice. They're submissions. If you send letters, they can cast them aside. If you entitle it an individual submission on Bill C-51 and send that in, they must read it. This is about the only method we have left. Bill C-44, which has passed a short time ago through committee, had 4 hours of investigation and 1 hour and 47 minutes of clause by clause. This was the original bill that allows CSIS to go wandering into any country they want, do whatever they want, wherever they want, against any country's law with a warrant from a JP. That was the original. This one does the same thing. It reinforces that. This is the same committee that's looking at this. Do we want this bill, which is so destructive to the way of life of Canadians, taking away our freedom, turning us into a McCarthy, Nazi, well, I wouldn't go so far as to say Nazi because that was a party, but a terrorist state where we're all frightened of offending our neighbors in case they may decide to turn us in under some trumped up charge, saying that they really believe this was the case? Do we want that? Do we want our civil liberties taken away by something like this? And bear in mind one more thing before I close this off. Paulson was asked if anything in this bill changed the laws that he already had or gave him greater power than the laws he already had in effect to deal with terrorism. And his answer was no. He doesn't need this. He says it would be nice to have. I'm not quite sure why he thinks that, but he says it would be nice to have, but he doesn't need it. We have the War Measures Act. We have all kinds of anti-terrorism acts. We don't need this. We don't need Bill C-44. Unfortunately, the government figure they do, so that they can turn you and I into captive slaves. Not for me. So please, do what you can to send in a submission to the committee. And if that doesn't work, don't throw that submission away, because when the time comes that it goes to the Senate, we can do the same thing again. Hopefully we can make somebody on the government side in either of those houses think twice about what they want for their children and their grandchildren. Their immediate rewards are one thing, but they're for children and their grandchildren to grow up in a world, especially a country, in fear of saying the wrong thing to the wrong person. No, not for me. I like freedom of speech, and I like people to be able to say to me what they want to say without fear of some kind of legal retaliation from me. That's it for now. On this beautiful spring day, which is just about 3 weeks early because we're still in winter in Victoria, British Columbia, this is Jeremy Arney saying, enjoy, and please help me fight Bill C-51. Thank you.